Welcome back, viewers. Thank you so much for joining me. I know it's been a long time since I had posted onto the channel. A lot has been going on, and it has been a busy new year, basically. And I hope you had a good festive season. And I would say Happy New Year to those who are tuning in. We haven't, watched videos, beginning of the year. Thank you so much for joining me today. And in today's video, I'm just going to answer a question that one of the viewers actually asked in terms of a comparative analysis of child protection processes as well as procedures in England and Scotland. Before I proceed, I just want to put a disclaimer to say I'm not going to consider myself a guru in social work, but the information I share with you, it's more from my own researches and from my own knowledge of being a practitioner for a long time, really. So in that way, I'm not saying everything I'm gonna say here. You need to take it as gospel as such, but do your own research. But I'm just sharing information from my own learning and from my own self-directed, quest, for knowledge, basically. In response to this viewer, I'm just gonna touch on the key differences or the key elements just to give you sort of like a clue of the key differences in child protection processes as well as procedures between Scotland and England. Just to let you know, the processes within England and Wales are more or less the same. So I'll just talk about the difference between England and Scotland. As you know, the jurisdictions are a bit different, even though both countries are part of the United Kingdom, really. First and foremost, before I dive into what I'm going to be sharing today, I just want to emphasize that child protection processes and procedures, between the two nation states share some, similarities, but also, kind of differ due to different legal frameworks and policy approaches that actually derived, or which are actually being implemented in the two different countries, which I'm going to be talking about today. First and foremost, I'm just going to talk about England, then I'll move on to Scotland. So I'm going to talk about 4 points, basically, in terms of how things are done in England. I'm not going to dwell much in all the points that you may want me to dwell much on this video, but I'm just going to give you the key the key the key items that will actually help you differentiate how the processes and the procedures are like between the two countries. So the first one is in regards to legislation. So with regards to legislation within England, obviously, the primary legislation we use is the Children's Act of 1989, which is to an extent supplemented by the Children's Act of 2004. Those are the key legislative, pieces of legislation that we use, the main ones. Obviously, there are other, legislative frameworks or legislative pieces which we also use, but that's the main one. And this emphasize the welfare of the child is paramount. So that's the one that kind of guides most of the things that we do within child protection or child protection in England, basically. And then in terms of the procedures, these are usually guided by what we call local safeguarding children's boards. For those who may know, obviously, for areas like West Midlands, there will be West Midlands local, partnership safeguarding procedures. For those who practice in London, there will be pan-London child protection procedures, which will be applicable for the whole of, Greater London, and for West Midlands, which will be applicable for the whole of West Midlands, as well as for those who in East Midlands. There's also East Midlands child protection, procedures which will be applicable. But obviously, each and every local authority has got their own localized procedures that they do also follow on a day-to-day basis. But when it comes to case transfers and all that, you kind of you are guided by the regional framework that is applicable to the region that you're working in. There is also what we call multi-agents safeguarding hubs, which are operational in most local authorities. So that's one thing about which is actually happening in England. And then in terms of children who are identified to be at risk of significant harm, or who are at immediate risk, there is what we call child protection plan, which is actually developed. If you feel that the child is at risk of significant harm, obviously you make a referral to an initial child protection conference, and the conference is held to determine whether that child needs to be on a child protection plan or not. Sometimes the outcome can actually be child in need plan. So this is just obviously is developed to ensure their safety as well as their well-being. So in England we use what we call child protection plans, and I'll also touch a little bit in terms of what they do in Scotland. And then when it comes to child protection services, the inspectorate or oversight is done by Ofsted. So there is periodic Ofsted inspections which are done to make sure that the services which are being offered to children and young people are actually complying with the expectations of the of the inspectorate, and they are also complying with statutory requirements according to the act which I spoke about earlier on. And there are usually Ofsted reports which are issued after each and every inspection or after each and every visit. That's the main thrust, that's the main things which I can talk about, obviously, in terms of child protection processes and procedures in England. Then moving on to Scotland. In terms of legislation in Scotland, they use the Children's Act Scotland of 1995, which is a little bit different to the Children's Act of 1989 in England. And then there is also, they've augmented with what they call the Children and Young People's Act of Scotland of 2014. Those are the most two key pieces of legislation which they use in Scotland. They also have a framework which they call the Getting It Right for Every Child, or the GIRFEC, GIRFEC. That's the abbreviation for that. It's an approach which is central to child protection as well. It's a little bit different, from England, but the main thrust is the same, to make sure that children are safe, with whoever is actually caring for them. And then in terms of their procedures, in terms of where we have our initial child protection conferences, they have what they call child protection committees, which are responsible for the local implementation of, obviously, the child protection policies. Where we have the local safeguarding boards, they have the child protection committees, which are responsible for implementing child protection policies within the localized areas. And then they also have the national guidance, for child protection in Scotland, which provides the whole framework for practice in the whole of Scotland. That's slightly, a bit different from England, obviously, where things are kind of regional. And then number three, we have got child protection orders in Scotland. They also use what they call child protection orders, which are similar to child protection plans, but however, these are orders which are used to protect children who are at most risk, right? And then in terms of inspection and oversight, the difference with England, where we have got Ofsted, in Scotland they have what we call the Care Inspectorate and the Her Majesty's Inspectorate of the Constabulary in Scotland. So there is two inspections which go hand in hand. The Inspectorate of the Constabulary in Scotland does inspect child protection procedures or child protection processes within the police Scotland, and then the Care Inspectorate also inspects child protection processes and procedures as they are being done by children's services, but they're also localized with they are delivered through the local authorities and so forth. So that's the main key differences, really. So I spoke about the approach where in Scotland they've got what they call the GIRFEC, which are getting it right for every child. That's the GIRFEC, GIRFEC. That's the approach which they use there, which is obviously more holistic, focusing on the well-being of the child, in a broader sense. Whereas in England the focus is more on safeguarding, and protection of the children. Obviously I've spoken about the different legislation, and moving on then to the key challenges. So in terms of the key challenges, they are basically the same. The the challenges which are faced by councils in Scotland in terms of delivering child protection is basically the same. One is the resource constraints. As you know, there's always been budget cuts within local authorities or within the government. So, local authorities, they're all facing, budget cuts, leading to, being understaffed sometimes or, overburdened in terms of, the services which are being offered really. So obviously when the way there's resource constraints, there is bound to be, challenges in terms of implementation of, whatever, that needs to be implemented as well. It often leads to high caseloads because obviously where people are understaffed, all that work needs to be absorbed somewhere, somehow. So social workers frequently, manage high caseloads, which can impact on the quality of care and sometimes attention which is given to each and every case which they actually deal with. And then the other challenge also is, multi-agents working or inter-agents coordination, which is, prevalent both in England as well as in Scotland. It's always a challenge because obviously we're talking of different thresholds within the police, where they talk about, beyond reasonable doubt to an extent, and there's also differences in threshold within health, thresholds within social care. So it's about bringing together and triangulating all those three agencies, the key agencies, to make sure that we align and agree on actually thresholds when a case has actually been referred. So there is need for obviously ensuring that there is effective communication, among those agencies, as well as collaboration, especially health, education, police, and other, agencies as well, which can be challenging sometimes. It's not always smooth. It's not always, the case. And then there is also an issue around training and retention. The reason why I've actually bundled up training and retention, because it actually goes hand in hand. If you look at it, if you have challenges around retention, then you also have challenges in terms of training, because once you recruit staff, you need to be able to retain them. But once you are not able to retain them, it means you are constantly retraining people. So, there is always a challenge around, training and retention, because obviously training is quite expensive, as you would know. And obviously the ability to retain staff depends on sometimes what's on the table, what's being offered. And as you know, at the end of the day, it's somebody's choice whether they want to work as permanent in a local authority or they want to work as agency in a local authority, or as locum, as you would know. So there is always this continuous need for training to keep up with best practices within the field. And also, the issue of retaining experienced staff. There are many programs which are being implemented now, especially in England. I'm talking about England more because obviously that's where I'm practicing. We are talking of the apprenticeship route. We are talking of the return to social work programs. We are talking of the step up, to social work programs, which are being implemented to make sure that we always churn out, social workers year in year out, to make sure that we fill the gaps which are obviously there. But however, because it's a highly pressurized environment, highly pressurized profession, people do leave because of the high stress nature of the job that we do. So there are always challenges to in terms of retaining staff. So hopefully with those few points, I have managed to kind of break down the nitty-gritties of the differences, and I hope to my viewer you have managed to actually grasp something from this video. You can go further and read on your own, and you'll be able to gain much information, but this was just a brief video, less than 50 minutes, just to give you sort of like an overview of the key differences really. And I hope I've answered your question. Thank you so much for watching. If you are new to the channel, please do subscribe, hit that notification bell so that when I post, you're the first one to know. And thank you so much for supporting the channel. We are on a journey. Very soon, maybe we might be around 5,000 subscribers. So please keep on tuning and watch the videos, share as much as you can. Thank you so much. Enjoy. Bye-bye.